evening. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Elizabeth Miller with the National Capital Planning Commission, and as has been said, we're going to give you just a really brief overview of our work plan and our scope, so you kind of know where we're headed and where we're going in the time frame. And Bill mentioned earlier that we're creating an eco-district, and that we're getting a lot of questions on what is an eco-district. And one of the things that our task force did a while back was to actually come up with a very simple project mission statement to help guide our work. And that's to transform the 10th Street and Maryland Avenue corridors into vibrant, well-connected places to commemorate, visit, live, and work in a way that creates a national showcase of sustainable practices through innovation, technology, and design. And where the opportunity is here for us is that more than half of the land in the area, and more than half of the land and the buildings, are federally owned. And this provides the federal government with the opportunity to take a leadership role in demonstrating energy, environmental, and economic performance at a precinct scale, which is what Bill had mentioned earlier, working beyond just a single building. Many of you may be familiar with the work that some of us, both the city and the NCPC has done here in the past with the framework plan and the Center City Action Agenda. But this initiative is intended to focus in on a greater level of detail that will help us to address the really significant challenges that we face in probably one of the most complex areas of the city. So it's those details that we want to start beginning to share with you tonight. The Southwest Ecodistrict Task Force will guide the actual planning process and preparation of a revitalization plan that's going to address sustainability, land use, urban design, and infrastructure improvements. And this will be led essentially by NCPC, working very closely with both our federal and local partners. The Office of Planning will be working, as we said, on a component of this, focusing on the Maryland Avenue corridor. And each agency's work will help inform the recommendations for the overall plans, and both of these processes will include public and stakeholder input. So what's our timeline? Essentially, we're in phase 1 now, and we'll continue through this work until mid-April. And in addition to those items that we're talking about with you tonight, which is really our inventory of existing conditions and our key findings regarding opportunities and constraints, DCOP is going to be conducting a market study for the area. NCPC and our consultants are going to be looking at sustainability strategies, and both of us will actually be looking at how to deck both Maryland Avenue and the Southwest Freeway. And I should mention, we can't do this work alone. It's really taking a lot of special expertise, and we brought on a great team of consultants, some of which are here with us tonight. ZGF is working with NCPC, and one of their subs is ARIP. AECOM is working along with OP, and both of us are working with a firm called Enuma Inc. to help us with a lot of the building modeling that you may have seen here in the back. So we will move into our second phase in mid-April, and that will go till probably late summer, late July, early August. And that's when NCPC and OP will both be looking at developing a range of alternative scenarios, and we'll be analyzing the cost and benefits. Again, with OP focusing on the Maryland Avenue corridor and NCPC focusing on the 10th Street corridor as well as the other areas within the eco-district. Phase 3 will begin in early fall and will last what we anticipate through the end of the year. We will start to refine our recommendations and start to report those out. And as Harriet said, the DCOP is going to be looking at preparing a small area plan that will go for review and adoption by the City Council. NCPC will be working with our task force on the recommendations for the Southwest Ecodistrict Plan that will then go before review and consideration before our federal commissions. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to my partner, Joyce, who is managing this for the Office of Planning.
Thank you. Just going to give a brief overview of the small area plan. And as you've heard, this is part of our participation in the Southwest Ecodistrict Initiative, and we'll be preparing a small area plan for the corridor to guide local planning and also development decisions. This work is being closely coordinated with NCPC, and the recommendations that come out of this process will feed into the overall task force initiative, their recommendations. So the purpose of this plan is really to establish a land use, urban design, and zoning framework for this avenue, and with a particular focus on studying the feasibility and viability of decking the avenue to create and design a space that people want to be. So during the 8-month-long planning process, we will work with local government agency representatives, landowners, office workers, nearby residents, and also transit and railway operators. We've already met with CSX, VRE, Amtrak, as well as a few property owners along the corridor, and also members of our project team, like the District Department of Transportation, and NCPC, of course. So together, we hope to identify opportunities for revitalization, as Elizabeth just pointed out in the scope and work plan, review market and feasibility findings, develop infill alternatives, and draft recommendations for establishing Maryland Avenue. We think that the vision and the framework plan is a great starting point for the overall vision of the avenue. As Harriet pointed out, active street life and economic development opportunity is hindered in this area of the city due to a lack of a 24-hour population and poor connections. As you can see on the slide, this is an overall diagram of Center City. And the area that's called out is the kind of neighborhood that we're studying, and it really shows that this is a common challenge in other areas of Center City, where connections to the mall, other emerging neighborhoods like Noma, Capitol Riverfront, and then also to other destinations in the city. So the Maryland Avenue right-of-way is not that different from other challenges that we're facing. And it is a hurdle today, but its proximity to the mall is a great opportunity to build from. And so just a few kind of questions that we'd like to think about and answer through this process with you is, how can the avenue be decked? What are the strategies that could help make that happen as far as funding? What are the types of development that could activate this avenue? And then also what transportation connections would greatly enhance this type of project. So in the end, the plan will recommend a range of ways we can accomplish better connectivity and great livability, and what partnerships, policy, and resources are needed to do so. So with that, just want to introduce Amy Tars, who will start the existing conditions.
Thank you, Joyce. Good evening, everyone. My name is Amy Tars, and the next 3 presentations that you're going to hear about are actually the highlights of our existing conditions inventory. And we're going to pose some questions to you that we'd like to talk to you more about later on when we break out and go back to the actual stations. So our initial findings show that the study area is underdeveloped and can accommodate a wide range of land uses than what exists there today. This map, if you look at the area within the study area, shows that there are only 3 colors which represent 3 land use types in our study area. In fact, when you look closer in the study area, you'll notice that the red and orange are actually showing primarily the same type of land use, which is office. And the only difference is that the orange actually has some retail on the ground floor. But even that, we found out that the retail is not adequate in meeting the needs of the employees and the office workers in the study area. So we'd like to hear your ideas about what other types of land uses would be appropriate for infill development in this study area. We'd also like to hear your ideas on how to make the parks more inviting, especially Banneker Park and Reservation 113, which are identified as candidate sites for memorials of national significance in the Museums and Memorials Master Plan. And what historic features are important to you? LaFont's plan for Washington intended Maryland Avenue to mirror Pennsylvania Avenue, with both avenues radiating from the U.S. Capitol. Along with Virginia Avenue, these diagonal streets were meant to link the major public squares and federal buildings in the vicinity. But as you know, we find railroad tracks today where these streets were meant to be. Urban renewal development in the 1950s also changed the character of 10th Street by widening and elevating what used to be a residential street into a grand thoroughfare and created the 10th Street overlook at the southern terminus. In the early 70s, 10th Street was renamed LaFont Promenade and the overlook renamed Banneker Park. Given the significance of LaFont's plan, we'd like to hear from you whether the streets in the study area should be restored as LaFont envisioned them, and what types of land uses and developments are most appropriate along these corridors and rights-of-way. And we also need to think about the modern architecture built around this time, which is only now beginning to be evaluated for potential listing in the National Register for Historic Places, given that most of them are reaching the 50-year threshold used as one of the criteria for nomination. At the northeast corner of the study area are several buildings currently under evaluation for potential inclusion in the National Register. These include the FAA's Orville and Wilbur Wright buildings and the Department of Education headquarters. We'd also like to hear your ideas for new national and local destinations for the proposed eco-district. Currently, there are more than 50 major cultural and recreational destinations around the study area, shown as blue dots on the map, and historic structures shown as brown buildings. However, within the study area itself, there are only two, Banneker Park and the HUD building, which is listed in the National Register for Historic Places. The Eisenhower Memorial will eventually become a third major destination within the study area. If we are to connect the dots from the National Mall to the waterfront through our study area, what types of cultural entertainment and historic attractions will it take to do that? So now I'm going to have Sarah Moulton come over to talk about the urban design issues that we'd like you to think about.
So, urban design. It's definitely a major component of this project, and it's really the part that takes all of the environmental, the social, and the economic elements of sustainability, and it reveals all of it at a human scale. It's really that piece that everybody in the neighborhood interfaces with on a daily basis. So many of the issues that I'd like to hear from you tonight to discuss back at the Urban Design Station involve connectivity, and Director Tregoning kind of hit on this a little earlier. How do we create that destination, that location that brings people from that very federal national mall down to that very local Southwest waterfront that's about to be redeveloped? We have some very street-level design challenges too. On the one hand, there's excellent transit access thanks to the metro stations, the VRE station down there. There's countless bus routes and stops down there. But how do we kind of take that as a model and fix the challenge of something as simple as getting from 10th Street down to D Street, as you can see here in the picture, on foot, or try it worse yet with a bike or a walker or a wheelchair. It's physically not feasible, and we really need to figure these issues out. Finally, there's this whole smaller scale of urban design, kind of the texture that really starts to create that fabric of the neighborhood, weaving together that one cohesive community that's not there right now. Some of the elements are physical, streetscape, pavement, landscaping. Some are programmatic. How do you get a business improvement district down there to program the public spaces? A good example of both of these involves creating an open space network, kind of linking the public parks, the plazas, and the streetscape together. So how do we connect and activate spaces like here, Reservation 113, with another smaller space like the plaza in front of HUD? It's that scale that we really get to envision the texture of the place and kind of what makes it unique on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, and on an annual basis too. So please come visit the Urban Design Station. I've heard from many of you already tonight, and I thank you for your time, and I look forward to having some more good conversations with you. So at this point, I'm going to hand it off to Diane Sullivan to talk about stormwater, energy, and waste. Thanks.
Good evening, everyone. Over the past couple of months, we've been working very closely with GSA and other federal agencies within the study area to begin benchmarking the performance of the federal buildings and then the overall district itself. I'm going to give you a couple highlights in terms of water, waste, and energy, but I really encourage you to talk to me and Kenny and others back there, because we really have a lot of exciting information and are starting to think about some strategies. So let's start with water. This district, or the Southwest Ecodistrict itself, it receives about 39 inches of rain per year, about 3 inches a month, and that's 92.4 million gallons of rain annually. Our goal for this area is to manage what's called a 95th percentile rain event, and without getting into all the engineering of that, that basically means we're going to be managing all of this water. That's a very aggressive goal for this area that is so highly urbanized. So my question to you, and one we're going to be struggling with over the next few months, is how are we going to capture this rainfall, reuse it, and then reduce our potable water use? The reason this is important is that if we don't, all this water goes into the storm sewers and has to be pumped out to the treatment plant, which is a very energy-intensive process. So the more that we can capture and reuse within this area, the better. So in looking at our federal buildings here, and this is just a comparison between the federal buildings themselves. We have that that DOE and HUD, the Department of Energy and HUD, are sort of using the least amount of water per person today compared with some of the other buildings, and we definitely overall have big improvements that we can make. And then in terms of the area itself, it's 21% pervious, meaning only 21% of this area right now is actually capable of capturing any rainfall. So we have another great opportunity there. Let's talk about energy for a second. Variety of sources of energy for this area. The first one is PEPCO, coal-generated electricity. We have natural gas. A unique feature here is our cogeneration plant that's operated by GSA that provides the steam and chilled water for all the federal buildings, and actually the Smithsonian Institution and some DC buildings in the city as well, but certainly the ones in our district here. And then renewable energy. We don't have a huge amount of renewable energy right now, but the Department of Energy has a nice solar array on top of their building, and HUD's going to be installing one soon. Just quickly, our goal for energy is also very aggressive. We want to create strive for a zero net energy district. That means that all the energy that we're going to be using within this area, we want to be creating within this area from renewable resources or from renewable resources very close to this area. So our question to you, and again we'll be struggling with this over the next few months, is how on earth are we going to be able to do this? So the first big thing that we need to look at is making our buildings more energy efficient. These buildings most of them were built in the 60s, and it probably isn't a big surprise that they're underperforming today. So a quick look based on GSA's information, we have that actually GSA's regional office buildings performing the best right now. We have many, many opportunities here in terms of looking at the cogeneration plant, which is fueled by natural gas, seeing if we can get that on renewables, and looking at installing renewables throughout this area, and then also just reducing the energy, improving the energy efficiency of the buildings. And then lastly, we've been looking at waste. How much do we have? What are we producing? Where is it going? In terms of recycling, the Department of Energy is recycling 58% of their total waste, which I think is very impressive. And the other buildings are hopefully going to be catching up soon. So, and then in terms of composting, nobody that we know of is composting, even though everyone has a cafeteria. So we have huge opportunities here. And I know a lot of people throughout the country, the world, actually are looking at doing a lot of really neat things with organic waste. So if if you're familiar with this technology, and we'd love to hear from you what you know. So the last thing I just want to say is we have drafted goals for the Southwest Ecodistrict and objectives on how to implement these goals. They focus on creating this national showcase of sustainability, a cultural destination area, and then, as everyone who has spoken tonight mentioned, a vibrant community here. And so we encourage you to look at them. They're on the back of your agenda, I understand, and also on our website. We would love to hear your feedback. So now I'm turning it back to Elizabeth, I think, to answer questions.